Hello, welcome guys to this season 14 LFM license guide. This time around, the track they chose is Paul Ricard. And as you can see, it is rather special shaped and it's probably most famous for its long straight, but straights are usually not the part that is the most tricky for you to learn. So we're gonna take a lot of emphasis on getting the right way through the corners in order to easily achieve license. This will be accompanied by a data pack on popometer.io, which is going to be completely free. All you have to do is register. There's no money needing to be paid. Everybody's going to have access to this data pack, which is done with the M4 GT3. I made a dedicated setup for this that is particularly safe and easy to drive. And that should hopefully help you along acquiring your license. What do we need to achieve here for the license? There's rules on LFM, and if you check out their FAQs, you'll see the license test is actually a short hot stint of 7 consecutive valid laps, which means you must not go off track, which is, I think, the only thing that actually can invalidate a lap. So that is your target. So we'll need fuel for at least 8 laps because the outlap out of the box does not yet count. The setup already includes fuel for easily 9 or 10 laps, so you can just do a bit more. And if you fail the first laps, no worries, just keep going. However, there's a second thing, and that means there's a 107% rule. That means the average lap time that you need to achieve has to be faster than 107% of the current fastest lap on the track. So it's all a bit dynamic. However, the fastest lap on the track usually doesn't change by much. Right now, that fastest lap is a 151.9. What you need to achieve on average is a 159.8. So it's pretty much a full 8 seconds slower. What do you need to achieve? And if we just look here, I deliberately made a lap that is nowhere near the 151.9 mark. We're still a fair 2.2, 2.3 seconds off that, just to show you that even driving suboptimal, not using the entire track width, not being aggressive on the inputs, you can still easily achieve that lap time and have 5 and a bit seconds of room while still getting your license. Because I think there's a bit of a misconception for some people what that license actually means. Many people will just push way too hard in this lap and actually try to battle the lap time. But the test is much more about you being able and showing that you're able to try and drive consistently and put the goal of being clean and safe over the goal of being fast. So let's get in that a little. And I recorded a lap here in hot lap mode because that also records a ghost car file, which you can also get within the data pack. If you just hit download on that, you'll get the setup, the replay, and the ghost file. Just there's a description where you need to put the ghost file, and then you can see it in your game, and basically you can just follow that ghost car. All right, let's get into that track guide, and I'll go through the details as we normally do while we approach corner 1 and do some explaining what I'm actually trying to achieve on that lab here, and also how we find reference points on this track, which is usually quite nice, but there's a main challenge on that track, and that are the track limits, because it's pretty much a parking lot. That's what you'll often hear it called, because there's tarmac everywhere. There's painted lines, there's curbs, but there will always be more tarmac after the curbs, which, yeah, well, invites you to use the track it is offering or use the track width it is offering, and that is where even more lap time can be found. But again, for the purpose of this license guide, we really do not need to tap into the absolute limit of anything. We don't need to be the widest. We don't need to be the tightest in the corners. We don't need to be the fastest in the corners. We don't need to be the latest on the brakes and all of that. So where is your braking marker for turn 1? Say for the pro drivers, we're probably looking at something like the 100-meter board, which is pretty much right where this curb ends, where the first cone is going to be found, maybe slightly ahead of that. But we forget that right away again. What we're aiming for when doing the license guide is just the beginning of that curb here or the end of the blue color on the right side there. Also, if you go for track guides for the actually super fast laps, then yes, what they will tell you is this track is very lenient on how much track you can use, and the track limit usually is that white line. And that means your inside tires, so these two, they have to stay on the tarmac, so like so, basically. Which means your outside tires, let's do them blue here for a second. Well, in hindsight, not a great choice because we're painting them blue. They can be here, kinda. Okay, this is the track limit the game would allow you to use, but this is already means pushing it for lap time, which is not what we want to do in this guide and what we don't want to do in this test. So we forget about that. We just stay well clear of the track limits, so you can actually do this in the first attempt. 7 consecutive laps, clean, without off-track invalidations. Okay, so we're not going for the maximum track width. We're not trying to risk and invalidate the lap. Which also means if we're not using the full track width, we have to brake a little earlier because we just can't take the corner as fast, okay? And then in this guide, we want to follow the principles. And the first principle will be to just stay on the outside until you really want to turn in. And ACC does a great job here with the ideal line where everything is a bit darker on the track is usually a good benchmark to follow. So let's slow down a little and have a look at my braking input, which is going to be the so far black bar here. But as soon as I go off throttle, I'll hit the brake and this bar is going to fill up red. And the only thing I wanted to see here is that you can see my maximum braking is never reaching 100% here. And it's even better to visualize if we just go into the data a little. This is the actual lap we're looking at. Just go for turn 1, turn 2, and we can see the whole brake trace throughout the entire braking zone quite easily. And you can see as we decrease the speed, we decrease the braking as well. And the more we turn in, the more we keep decreasing the brake until we kind of have the maximum steering angle for that corner. But my main point here is we do not need 100% braking. We don't want to push to the limits here. We're not trying to achieve the world record. We want to pass the license test. And that is why you want to brake at a point where you still have room to make further adjustments. Where if you feel you're too fast, you can just brake a tiny bit harder, brake a tiny bit longer, and then bring the speed down to where you need it to be. But it's all well possible, not attacking or being aggressive at all. We just want to cruise through here, okay? All right, so we're trailing off the brakes, and then as the speed decreases, as we're coming closer to the corner, probably best to view it from the cockpit perspective, we're aiming for that first curb, and it's as long as you keep that cone here alive, it is quite easy to see. If that cone is gone, however, it can be a bit more tricky. What can help us if you just hire your camera, for example, or rather the seat in the car, so to say, and if you sit a little higher, you might have it a bit easier seeing this. And again, we're not trying to be super realistic. We're not trying to achieve the world record. We just want to pass the test. So everything that makes you pass the test is allowed. So if you need help seeing a little bit better, don't kind of shy away from adjusting the view settings or something. That is completely fine. Then the next important thing is, as we go for the corner, as the turning angle increases, you'll see the brake drop further and further and further. And then again, the same thing kind of applies on the inside of the curb here. Sorry, where the car will be allowed to cut the curb pretty much until the white line, which is, I guess, just going through the car here right now. And you will see my tires are still well clear of that track limit. Okay, we don't want to take the risk here. We cut it a little bit. We can do even less, no problem. but just make sure you are never cutting and getting the off-track validation, because that will be super frustrating because you need to restart your run from zero. And that's just what we don't want to do here. We want to ideally get this done in the first run. Then there's already kind of the next principle, just to kind of remind you. The first principle was to not push to the limit, okay? We always want to have room below the limit in that specific scenario of getting the test done. Then the next thing is, the next principle will be when we have corners that are connected, so where there's kind of no straight in between, and where there's little time to adjust. And say if you do the first corner too fast and you end up here, you're compromising your entry into that right-hander, okay? And if you're, for example, going way too slow through the first corner, then you'll end up here and you'll be prepared for turn-in when you don't actually need it. Then what we want to achieve is we want to find the middle ground of that. So we don't want to go too far, too deep into the first corner, and we don't want to go too slow into the first corner so that the second corner is too easily flat out. We want to be in a position where the second corner here is kind of just about flat out. So we want to be in a position where the car at the speed that it is carrying is just about able to go flat out while using all the track available. This is going to be somewhere in the middle of the track, and this means we're going to make the compromise in terms of speed and line so that our car is somewhat going to end up in the middle of the track, which kind of means making a compromise in the first turn to open up the right-hander and just in a position where we can just about take this flat out, okay? If we want to go flat out, we might go wide on exit. We might be forced to clip the curb on the inside too much. Again, we're risking to go off track, which we don't want to do here, okay? Just be ready to lift the throttle a bit. It's completely fine. We are not trying to break world records. I can't emphasize this enough. It is very easy to get carried away. Maybe even turn off the HUD. You don't need to see the lap time. It's not important for us. If you follow this, you'll easily be below the 107% mark. So if we just look at that, what I was just painting, you can see I did an even bigger compromise here compared to what I was just painting on the track. So I'm taking a kind of tight swing through the first corner, staying tight on the exit and opening up the right-hander a lot, which in turn allows me to carry a lot of speed through the turner, through the turn, and more importantly, onto the straight. Because that is, well, kind of the next principle is we want to put emphasis where we spend the most time. And usually we spend much more time on the straights after a corner than we spend inside a corner. So this is probably 1-2 seconds in the corner, another second, maybe another 2 seconds in the corner, but then we're going to be like 10 seconds on the straight. So we want to be fast where we spend the most time. That is why the exits are so important. So we always want to emphasize exits over entries, which is the principle of slow in, fast out. You've heard it a million times. Now you've seen it in practice. The other bit here is, and now we just go back inside the car, I think. There is a bit of a difference. Let's actually let the car roll a tiny bit further here. Right here, maybe. Where there is a bit of a difference that we want to look out for. And that has to do with the slope of the track. Some tracks will be perfectly flat, but more often than not, the tracks will have a banking, for example. So this might go down, in another corner this might go up, or the curb has a certain shape. So we want to take a look at how that curb is shaped. And the first thing you'll see, this is pretty flat. It has a bit of a rumble strip on the inside, but then it is flat on the very inside next to the cone, which means the car can probably fairly easily drive on this without being much impacted by the curb itself. Now, if we just fly a little further, we see the next curb is shaped quite a bit differently, which in turn means it's going to affect the car differently. And as a driver, you just need to respect that. So what we can see now here is that the curb kind of has, well, I'll need to go even closer potentially, just to kind of show you the kind of the detail that is here, and that detail is going to matter. The curb kind of has a slope up here, then it's almost flat, then has a bit of an upslope there again, then it's another slope or whatever. So depending on where you put the inside tire on this curb, it's going to affect the car differently. And also, the higher you climb the curb, the more the car will roll over to the other side, which in the end will mean, let's just maybe roll it forward here. Well, it's from the cockpit perhaps. Now, as we go over the curb here, let's view it from the back once more, where the tires are actually placed. And again, we're just making sure the outside tires are well on the track, nowhere near the track limits. So we're trying to stay safe here. And I'm placing the tires just on that lap. It might vary from lap after lap, somewhere in the middle of the curb. And you can see the car is a bit off, like kind of on an angle. Now, it is not going to be as extreme, okay? But I just want to highlight that if the car is flat, we have a bit of camber on the tires, so they're gonna be like this. Then we go into the corner. This is all going to change a bit. The kind of gets compressed and the tire flexes, and maybe that's when it's going to be just about flat on the floor, provides a lot of grip. Now with the inside of the car lifted up, maybe we're actually running out of camber. This is all going to be painted way to extreme, okay? But maybe actually we're in a situation like this. Of course, again, I'm overdoing this massively, but you can see we're only on the tarmac with kind of the outside edge of the tire, which now has to bear all the load and all the forces, which means the car might be in a rather sensitive state. And this is why we want to respect that curb by being a bit easy on the throttle here. And I think you can see it much better when we see the chart here. So this is just when we attack the curb, all we have to understand is the car might be in a sensitive state where it can't kind of put enough forces into the ground. And we want to be a bit easy with the car here. Let it kind of roll over the curb without trying to accelerate it full force. And then once we've passed the curb, easily back onto full power. And that's going to make your life so much easier. If you're flat out over the curb, there is a good amount of risk that the rear end is going to snap. So every time you go over the curb, be ready to lift just a tiny bit, right? You're going to be on that curb for 2/10 max or something, and that's about the time you want to lift the throttle there. As soon as you've passed the curb, lower it again. Then let's move on to the next corners. And from now on, I hope that kind of all the principles are going to repeat. We're trying to find the next breaking point, and it's pretty nice here because we have the 100-meter board, and that is often the case across many tracks that the 100-meter board will have kind of an extension coming onto the track, which is the white line here. Sometimes the board won't be on the track. It will be kind of somewhere here on the wall or something. And then you'll have the line coming from there. So it's, I don't know, more difficult to see, or at least harder to see the 100-meter board and where the line originates from. Here, it's very easy. The pro drivers later, they're going to gravitate fully onto the blue stuff with the inside tire just barely within the white lines. But here, again, for our purposes, we don't need to be too extreme. And what we're aiming for braking is just about the 100-meter boards. Later on, if you go for lap time, that can be later. But for now, the white line is the perfect brake marker, really. So if we slow it down, I hope, actually in the cockpit, it always looks a bit different. So if we go from top, we're probably more braking at 110 meters or something. And you also see how wide the white stripe there actually is. But in the cockpit, this pretty much looks like just when the 100-meter board is clipping your A-pillar. That's when you want to hit the brake, and we do it the same way as in turn 1. To be sure, we're never needing the 100% brake. We always want to have a bit of room to adjust our speed to be able to go off the brake a bit, keep the speed up a little longer, or if we feel we're too quick, we can brake a little harder, bring the speed down. We always want to leave those 1, 2, 3, maybe 5% of room to make adjustments, not being forced to go off track, not risking the car kind of losing grip, sliding about, etc. The other bit here that we can kind of, or need to respect a bit, is that we're kind of not braking in a straight line, right? As we hit the brake, you can see that the track is already following some curvature. Maybe it's even better to see in the data, actually, if we go here for the braking. And that's why we want to position to the left quite quickly, coming along the straight here, really. Go back just a tiny bit. And you'll see there's just how the track is shaped. Kind of makes it a little more difficult. So we want to kind of stick to the left line here really aggressively. straighten the car, and as we go on the brake, that we need minimal steering throughout the braking zone. Because when you're fully on the brake, all the weight in the car leans forward, the rear gets a tiny bit loose, and when you have to steer in this situation, your rear end might start dancing around a little bit, which especially beginners can kind of feel uncomfortable in that situation, and then they lose focus what they actually want to achieve. So make sure you're able to brake in a straight line while kind of staying somewhere along the white line here with your outside tires while having room on the brake. Again, never 100% braking in this situation. We all take it easy here. As we start to turn in, let go of the brakes a little bit more and more and more. And then when we clip the inside, we don't want it. There was already too much risk that I took here. So sometimes just the experience gets the better of me. I know where to place the car, but be sure never to be too close to the white line here. The invalidation is just so frustrating, and I want to really prevent you of having to go through that frustration. The license should be something easy if you just respect the things that you need to respect here. Then we want to look at that section quickly from the top, and there isn't really a straight between these corners, right? That this here is hardly a straight, this here is hardly a straight. This is, well, not for long. It looks straight, but we're not spending a lot of time. Then you can also see the black ideal line here never really goes fully straight, indicating that somehow these corners are going to be connected. And that's why, again, we need to make somewhat compromises. So what I want you to think is, if you go very fast through the first corner here, you're going to end up in, well, maybe even wider in this position or something. And now you're going to spend a long time in this corner holding your speed, holding your speed, holding your speed, or you keep going too fast for that one as well, and it's going to put you wide here. And then you'll have not a turn in position for here, and you're going to go wide here, and then probably you're almost facing to go off track, so you brake hard or you have to go really slow, correcting the position, and you lose a lot of speed out of these corners. We, again, want to rather focus the black ideal line here, which already kind of emphasizes the right compromises to make. Let me turn the map a bit here so we can map it, match it better with telemetry that we have, just so it looks more similar when we look at the data here. Pretty much like this, I guess. Just so we're looking at the same section, you can see where the car is placed. So after the first turn, we want to be kind of middle of the track, so we have somewhat of a turn in position to the left-hander, and then after the left-hander, we're staying very much on the left half of the track, so to say, to get a turn in position to this right hairpin following there, okay? And which is pretty much in line with the black line there, but just kind of want to emphasize what the focus should be on. Having a good entry into the slow corner is going to increase your speed through that so much that it is worth kind of being a tiny bit slower here, tiny bit slower here, just to keep it at a tight exit and then carry a lot of speed through this small and tight hairpin here. That is quite important. The other bit is, later on, when you start chasing the lap times, you'll see there's a lot of track available, and you can pretty much place the entire car on the inside curb, but just for that purpose of getting the license, be sure to only kind of go onto the rumbly part of the curb, not the flat part on the inside behind the rain gutter, because then the risk of going off track with your outside tires is really high, and we definitely want to avoid that. I still need to put emphasis on a few more things here. First thing, the trail braking here. In this example, I did it pretty clean, but ACC is quite lenient. You don't necessarily have to do that. Just want you to be sure, never max the brakes here for the purpose of the license tracks. Later, when you go for lap time, you definitely will. But just for now, we want to have room to play with, room to adjust. And every time you're forced to 100% brake, you cannot adjust anymore because you're, kind of waiting for the physics to work with you and keeping you on the track. We want to stay below the limits of the physics here. And then between the two corners, there's a bit of stabilizing throttle coming off the curb here, which can help the car stay more neutral. If you roll over the curb without throttle applied, it might be a bit sensitive and over rotate. So sometimes if you clip a curb on the inside, a bit of throttle is fine, which can stabilize the car and give you a lot of confidence. Then we have to slow down a little further for the left-hander. And that is also something to kind of understand the flow in this section, is where the first corner here, we can see it with a minimum speed, is somewhere around 120 and a bit. Then the second corner is just shy of 100. And then the third corner is even slower by 20 kilometers or something. So just for you to kind of approach this section would be, this is the fastest of the corners. This is going to be slower. This is going to be even slower. So you kind of just fall into this pattern and rhythm of entering fast, go slower, go even slower, go even slower. Just so you kind of memorize that section maybe a tiny bit better, get a good feel for that. And then you might have a better chance to stay smooth and do this for a couple laps in a row. Also, check out how small my brake inputs here are just between those corners. When the car especially is in transition from going from the right to turning to the left, it is very sensitive on the front axle of losing grip. So we want to be careful on the brake and respect the car already using a lot of the available grip. And if we just slam the brakes here, we're probably overdriving the car, which we don't want to do. Then out of that turn, not just slamming the throttle, keep it on the level. This is kind of a thing with the turbocharged cars in the game. We need to put enough throttle for the exhaust to already produce exhaust gases, which spins up the turbocharger, and that is eventually where the power comes from. If you just go to, say, 20-30% throttle, nothing is going to happen, and that I think is something that's very unique to ACC among all sims, that you need to go to something like 60-70% throttle in the turbocharged cars to get any response from the car at all, and then you manage the entire output of the engine, basically in the last 30-40%. So this is something you want to get used to. If you're on power, put it up to 60-70% to actually get the feeling of, oh yeah, there's power available. But anything below that, you'll probably not have enough power to actually feel it and work with it. So be quick on the initial throttle most of the time to actually get the engine to work. And then the entire power output is between 60-100%, somewhat, right? Or 70-100%. And then only when the car is straight, when there's basically no or only very little steering applied, then we can be full throttle for a short period of time here before we go into the brake again. And then just notice not slamming on the brake. And also you can see as I go onto the brake, that is exactly in the steering trace here where you can see we are going across the middle line. So this is the 0 steering input. We're coming from turning left 50 degrees to turning right, well, something like 100 and a bit more for the hairpin. But the key is the timing here. What inputs do we do in sync? Which inputs do we do one after the other? And what you can see here is just that the transition from one side to the other is following in line with the brake input. And that helps you send the weight from one corner of the car to the other, swing the rear around a bit, get a better turn in. I guess for the license, this is already kind of an advanced technique. You don't really have to worry about it. But you can, if you want, you can start playing with that a little bit. The important bit is that it only works if you're not overdriving the car. So there's room left for grip. And if you just slam the brake, this is not going to work. You always have to kind of stay just about shy from the ABS there for it to work. Then trailing into that corner, focusing on the small straight here in between. The next one then is a really important corner. And I think here, this is the first time where I'll probably tell you to deviate a bit from where the ideal line is painted. We'll stay a bit wider than that. We'll turn in a bit later because we want a kind of a late apex in that corner and build a lot of speed, not just for the rest of the corner, but for this very long straight ahead of us. If you enter the straight 10 kilometers down, by the end of the straight, you'll still be 5 kilometers down and you will lose time for the entirety of the straight. So what you want to do is put a lot of focus on getting a good exit here. Okay, I don't even care how you do this. You can kind of follow my lines here as good as you want. You can slow down here even more, stay a bit wider for longer. But the important bit really is just get a fast exit here, okay? This left-hander here must be flat out, and you'll need to be in a position where you just about make that corner, okay? So you're using really all the track on the exit here and just about stay within the track limits. Then this is kind of giving you the indication that you carried enough speed. If that corner is way too easy and you can stay middle of the track, that usually means you have not built enough speed here out of the corner before. Ideally, when you want to do this like me, then this would mean we go in second gear. And just as we turn in, actually, let me look at the data here because that is going to show it many times better. So accelerating on the short straight here. And then as we turn into the corner, the important bit might be to not go off throttle entirely because that corner is very weird. We need to slow down a tiny bit. We need to go off throttle to allow the car to rotate in the first place, but we cannot lose a lot of speed because the corner is actually not tight enough. If we go too slow, we'll easily clip too much of the inside curb. We lose a lot of momentum that is very hard to build back. So if you go off the throttle here, make sure you're not too aggressive with it. Because if you let go of the throttle very quickly, you get a weight shift in the car gets sensitive, weird to control, might do things you didn't expect to do. And if you just go out of the throttle like 90, 80% or whatever, right? But just not to zero, just keep some throttle applied here. You will see that the car starts behaving much more predictable, especially should you be able to clip the inside curb here, which you can perfectly do. And then you can also already see where, I think that I would just want to introduce that feature here that we have on the website, is where is the slowest point in the corner and where is the tightest point in the corner. The tightest point you already all know, this is what everybody calls the apex. This is where you want to be the tightest to the inside of the corner, either on the curb or just next to the curb, but this is where you're the tightest, okay? But the other important point to kind of understand what you're doing or what a pro driver is doing differently is where you are the slowest in a corner. And you'll probably, if you record your laps, if you compare to that, again, that's going to be free for everybody trying to get this license. Just register on the website. You're all going to have access to this pack. You'll very often be in a situation where your slowest point in the corner is going to be after the apex, which means while the pro driver is already building speed from here, you're starting to build speed from here, which automatically means you're going to be 10, 15, 20 kilometers down, which you're never going to get back until the end of the straight. So you often find this, that the pro drivers are the slowest in a corner. So they're done braking, they're done slowing down before they actually reach the apex. Okay, so at this point where there is the slowest, then okay, the car is still gravitating towards the inside. I'll clip that apex so I can start accelerating again. So in slow motion, it's going to look like this. Bit of throttle applied. We're slowing down, slowing down, slowing down. And now I know, okay, the curb is coming ever further towards me. And at some point I know, okay, I'll clip it. This is the point where I want to be the tightest. There is no need to slow down further, else we go too far to the inside. So now we can already start picking up speed. And now the important bit is, because we still bring the car through a sensitive situation, clipping the curb more or less, and there's a lot of corner to go, we cannot be too aggressive on the throttle. So we bring it up again, 70, 80, 85% or something, and only once we mitigate the curb and leave it behind us, we can commit fully to the throttle without triggering too much traction control. And then we're trying to reposition here. We don't really need to go all the way to the right. Somewhat middle of the track, slightly towards the right is going to be fine. And this curb here, you can cut a lot. This is the one corner where the track limits are even weirder. Here it is not the white line, but kind of this line in between defines the track limit. So you can, or I think it's even more, but you can cut this a lot. So that's barely a corner. Just maybe before you go on the run, do a couple laps to find that, but you can kind of safely ignore the white line here, which allows you to steer much less through that corner, and steering much less also means you're going to be carrying a lot more speed, or at least you're not scrubbing a lot of speed away. Then very important in the M4 is always to pull the gearing towards kind of the complete end of the RPM, which is 6,999. Or maybe easier for all of you would be the speeds at which we shift up. So from second to third gear, it will be 134 kilometers. From third to fourth gear will be 173 or something, just leaving a bit of room there to never hit the ref limiter. From 4 to 5 is going to be above 210, 212, something like that. And from 5th to 6th gear is going to be 254, 55 kilometers, around that. If you short shift the car, you're probably going to lose out a bit of time. Not a lot, just a hint in this scenario. Now we're coming to one of the most interesting corners on the track, because we're coming from probably one of the fastest straights in the game, or in GT3 racing in general, and we have a corner ahead of us that is very fast. And now we get a car that is kind of a different car than we knew in the first sector. In the first sector, all corners were kind of slow, which means aerodynamics do not play a big part. Now, the next corner is going to well above 200. Even if you're a beginner driver, this is going to be very fast. And now aerodynamics kind of take over. So we need you to understand something. And I'm just going to make this really short, really simple. The closer the front end is to the ground, the more downforce it's going to produce. The more, or the higher the rear end is up in the air, the further away it is from the ground. In very simple terms, the less downforce it's going to produce. Now, all of you can probably imagine what happens if we hit the brakes. Well, yes, let's say this is the car on the straight, it's sitting pretty flat, and now you hit the brake, which means the car is going to go at an angle like this. So suddenly the rear is much further up than the front dives a bit more, and we get the effect of producing more downforce on the front, less downforce on the rear, which is going to make the car quite sensitive. So if we make the car sensitive and turn into a corner, then there's a high chance we're actually going to lose the rear end. So what we're going to do here, what we're going to try is, we are trying to slow the car down and pitch it forward before we actually turn into the corner. So if we just slow it down here one more time, let the car roll a bit. We're trying to go towards the left here a bit just to use a bit more track. But again, not too aggressive. Try not to go over the white line. Just aim for the middle of the curb somewhat with your left side. And then 100-meter board around that is going to be the point where we hit the brake shortly. And then we're releasing it already before we're going back into the corner. And this is how the front lifts up again, the rear settles a bit, and the car is going to be much more stable into that corner. So just to view it from above, where I'm done with the braking is well before we actually go for the corner. And the data here is going to kind of show this too, right? So here we're coming from the straight, 280 something. Go over to the curb, hit the brake shortly, right? And again, not even 100%, it's 80 something, up, down, we're braking for 50 something meters. Easy on the brake, easy out of the brake, just get rid of some speed. We can take the corner much, much faster than I'm doing here. But again, we're just trying to get the license, no world records involved. So slow the car down a bit, and then before you commit to the corner, be sure to be done with the braking. This is going to make your life many times easier. Then, same thing with the track limits here. We need to use some of it. It allows us to clip the inside a lot. Just, again, have to make sure we keep the outside tires just shy of the white line. And on the exit, the track limits are a bit weird again. This time we can cross the white line. It is actually the next white line that is going to be the issue. But leave a car width of room here. Again, we're not trying to go the fastest. We're trying to go 7 consecutive laps without invalidating. So make sure you stay within the lines that a game allows you. Coming out of this corner then, we have a short straight, and the track limits here they have a bit of a weird shape. And that's why you see me kind of drive this little notch here. Because if you go through one of these 3 things here, I think it's always invalidated. And that's why we kind of go around them a little bit. So just kind of avoid them, but then steer back onto the curb here. So we are still in a wide turn-in position for the next corner. How to find the brake point for this one? Again, the game is helping us a bit. There is the ideal line is becoming more pronounced again here. We can also see it from above. And that will be your latest braking point, but you can see just for the purpose of this lab, for getting the license, I'm 2-3 car lengths earlier than that, for the same reason that I just mentioned in the corner before, that we are going into a very long corner at rather high speed. And the more we are forced to brake into the corner, the more difficult the car is going to be to drive, because we produce so much downforce on the front and lose so much on the rear. Plus we get a weight shift and the rear just starts kind of dancing around, being a bit loose. You might have to counter steer, especially when you decide not to use the BMW, but a much more unstable car like the, I don't know, Ferrari or Porsche or Honda, then this is going to be a very tricky section here. So what we're trying to do is, and maybe that's better visible from here. Sorry, actually go for the right corner and we'll also see that. What we're trying to do is kind of put a diagonal line here where we don't have to steer too much. Very little steering input, almost a straight braking line, just aimed for the corner there. Then what we can also see in this corner, this is a very nice thing that we can show, this corner actually has two apexes. So we're going to be tight once, then we're going to be carried wide, and then when we are in the widest position, we're cutting to the inside, and that's when we're just shortly after that, we're going to have the slowest point in the corner, which means from where we start accelerating through a second apex that is coming for, well, pretty much here at the tightest point in that corner. But the key thing here is, first, on entry, make sure we're not forced to brake too harsh into the turn. Try to build somewhat of a diagonal line, and then get off the brake early so you're not forced to brake too much into that turn. And if you still have to brake, be very, very subtle, be very gentle on the brake, very little input. That's just going to make your life easier, okay? If we go later for lap time, you might have to be more aggressive, might have to deal with a more aggressive rear end and balance it out with the steering. But again, for the license, for the beginners, that is all completely irrelevant. So make sure you get your speed off while it's easy to get rid of the speed. And when you're already forced to go into the corner with steering angle applied, your rear end has a bit of trouble staying in place. And we just want to avoid that situation. Just braking a tiny bit earlier than what would be possible in an actual hot lap. That's the target here. Then the other bit you want to really focus on, be tight early on. Let the car run wide for a good amount of time. And you see the speed trace here is coming down all the way, still coming down, always decelerating up until this point. And you'll often face situations, especially as beginners, very normal, where you reduce more speed here. And then you stay stable here. Maybe you even accelerate again. Then you go down, accelerate again, and you're going to have a very choppy speed line here. The issue with that is every time the car accelerates, decelerates, changes attitude, the car is going to behave different, going to understeer, oversteer, understeer, oversteer, and that makes the corner very hard to predict. By keeping kind of a smooth way of permanent deceleration, might be hard initially, but then it's a bit less, might be a bit harder here, just tapping the brake once more to finally get the car to the speed that we desire. But keeping the speed coming down the entire way through the corner, that is very important to have a car that remains predictable and behaves in a way where you're like, okay, I know what the car is going to do. There will be less surprises, okay? Just make sure that you keep permanently reducing the speed until you can actually increase it again. Permanently, right? We don't want to have that choppy line because, again, the car changes behavior, makes it very hard to predict where the car is going to end up. So make sure you decelerate once into a corner, and deceleration also happens if you're just coasting. Doesn't need any pedal inputs. Just waiting sometimes is completely fine. Coasting is good. Just keep the speed coming down in a smooth fashion until you can actually accelerate again, then through that second apex here. I think on that lap, I might have been even a bit aggressive here on the exit curb. You probably don't want to be as wide here because you can very, very quickly lose grip here on the exit. The curb does not provide as much grip as the tarmac. And once you're on it, you might suddenly feel, oh, car stops rotating and you're going off track. So to make sure you leave some room on the exit here as well, to never invalidate your laps. Now, this was a very long corner. You might be stressed, but we don't really have brake ahead of us. And I think it's better shown here that you see, I'm always transitioning over to the other side. I never give myself a pause, never give myself a breath here, really. We always have to bring ourselves in the best possible position already for the next corner. So that, yeah, kind of we're not losing time from being out of position. So kind of don't relax here. Keep repositioning right over to the other side so that we have a good turn in position for the next turn there. Now here, it is very, very interesting to find the breaking point because there are no 100 or 50 meter boards on left or right side of the track. All we have is kind of the exit roads or whatever other track layouts are on the left side here. And there are a couple of cones. They might work in single player, might work in a qualifying, but let's say even especially over a longer race, someone will somehow manage to take out these cones. So they're probably not a good reference point to use. Either way, for now, you will see when I hit the brake, it is something like when this last cone is going to kind of go towards the A pillar. You really have to develop feeling for that. Or if the cone is away, maybe just how the edge of the curb starting there is coming towards you, or the distance it has towards you. I mean, you just go a tiny bit back where the brake is actually applied, and then you can see if we go from here, or if we even go from above, you can see I'm braking pretty much where the other curb starts kind of going away from us, well before the first cone there. So it can always be a bit misleading if you're watching the onboards. And even if I explain to you, look, we're going to brake at this last cone, what we're actually doing is we're starting to brake well before the first cone there. So make sure if you watch track guides and all that, that perspective can really be misleading. So just make sure what you're orientating towards, what you're using as a brake marker, and how you're using it as a marker. Are you actually on the same height or distance on the track with a cone, or are you still quite far away from it, right? So if you watch a track where it says brake at that cone, it's probably a lie, just because they didn't reflect properly. Same thing we want to do it here as in the corner before, is build somewhat of a straight braking line, which is much harder to do here. But the more straight the car is in a turn, wait, let's do it like that. The more straight a car is in a turn, the more easy it is to brake aggressively. The more straight you're going, the harder you can press the brake. The more cornering you're already doing, the less braking you can apply. And you can see this perfectly here. The maximum braking on this lap, it's going to be harsher on an actual hot lap, on a world record lap. But just, again, for the purpose of this guide, I'm perfectly fine here. 70% braking input, and just reaching the peak shortly and then decreasing. The deeper we go into the corner, the slower we become, the less downforce the car produces, the more steering angle I apply, the less brake input the car is able to convert into the track. So we have to respect that here as well. And I think that this whole trail braking, and why I'm kind of going on about this so much, it is so important for you to remain in control of the car. Once you're in the ABS, once you're braking too much, you're kind of a victim of the speed that you're carrying, and you have no other options to kind of control where you're placing the car. So we always want to stay below the actual grip limit, or below the grip limit. Okay, for this purpose, tiny bit below the grip limit. Always have room available to go tighter, wider, brake later, brake earlier. Just that we're not actually doing it. And for this trail braking, you can probably also do some exercises. Close your eyes. You're going to have this bar in the game, right? Close your eyes, sit in the pits, press 50% brake. You don't know where the 50 is, but try to press it. Open your eyes and check where you actually are. Okay, do this with 90, do this with 10%. You need to develop a feeling how much you're braking, because while driving, you have no chance to actually check that bar. And the most important thing for beginners is to get a feeling for the brake, how much they're actually releasing, how much they're increasing, how hard you're braking, or how little you're braking, and really blindly kind of finding these points where you can confidently say, hey, I need 80% braking here, and this is how much this is going to be. I don't even have to look at it. So really do that exercise, press your brake, and try to kind of comfortably put it on 50, put it on 80, put it on 20. And once you have that fidelity, you'll find trail braking a lot more easy. Then in this corner, it's super weirdly shaped. You can see the radius tightening ever more. And there might be ways to take this corner as sort of a double apex. So you're going to be more diagonal here in the braking. So you're being more aggressive. You're going to have a first apex here. Then you're going to go wide. And they're going to cut back for a second apex. I guess it's a line that could somewhat work, but it's probably not the fastest one. Instead, in this corner, there's like an apex here, okay? But we're not actually very tight. But then still, we're coming from the outside, getting kind of middle of the track, and then carrying a tiny bit wider again until we come back to the inside for that one single late apex here. And you see the same pattern here that I mentioned earlier. We're going to be the slowest before we actually come towards the very inside here, because again, we have a bit of a straight ahead. Straights are where we're going to gain or lose time the most, because we spend the most time there. So let's make sure we are having a good exit here, as straight as possible, right? As much as the car allows, but that usually means that we want to have a lot of throttle applied and the car can actually put it into the ground. Again, you'll also see the pattern here. Initial throttle needs to be 70-80% for the car to actually respond. But then we have to wait until we actually get rid of the steering here, until we can be 100% and we can really see the exit curve. So in the cockpit, this is going to look something like this. Let's do a quarter speed, coming from the outside, a little bit to the inside, but then let ourselves get carried away from the curb again, keep reducing speed. Then we kind of catch the ideal line here again. Then we go out of the brake, roll a bit. And now as we notice, the car is actually biting, coming to the inside. This is the point in time that is telling you, okay, now it's probably time for the throttle. And that's when we put it down. And now we just wait with a 80-90% throttle here until we can see the exit and we can kind of safely determine, okay, we're going to make it inside the track limits, and that's we're gonna put 100% throttle down. Again, make sure, leave a bit of room on the exit there. We are not hunting world records. Make sure your lap is valid. Now for the last two corners, they're again connected to one another. Probably the pro laps will kind of start entirely on the curb here and brake in an even wider position. But again, for this purpose, stay away from the white line where safety is our target here. And then we again trying to brake in a straight line for that corner, just to make our lives a little bit easier here. So you're gonna see something like this. We're just going to brake pretty much straight from the start of the braking until the first apex somewhat. This is almost a straight line, minimal steering applied, but you'll see the same pattern. Initially hard, and then trail, very deep into the turn. And again, also in the speed trace, you're going to see down, 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 until we can actually start to accelerate again and pick up speed. Try to avoid a situation where that line gets choppy, where you maybe lose too much speed here, then you hold it here, then you increase a bit, then you go down a bit. Every time your car is going to change behavior, and it's going to make your life very tricky to start repeating laps, because they're going to be different every lap. And then also your next corner is going to be inconsistent, because every time you approach the next braking zone here, you're going to have different speed. Sometimes going to be 130, sometimes going to be 120, sometimes 140, because you did an entirely different line before. So kind of the consistency in one corner demands consistency in the corner before. And the more gentle you are with the inputs, the more room you have to play with, the more smooth everything is, the more likely you'll kind of be in the same situation here, lap after lap. And that allows you to actually practice that corner, coming from the same position, same speed, same situation again and again. And then you can start adapting to that. So this corner is a bit weird here. It does look a bit like a double apex. Here's actually one marker missing. So this is an apex here. We go tiny bit wide, not really, tiny bit wide, and then come back for a second apex. So you can still kind of do this double apex approach a bit. But either way, we want to stay tight on the exit and open up the last hairpin, because again, we have straight ahead and we want to have speed onto that straight. Even that short run to the start finish line is going to be very important. And that's why we want to carry that exit speed. And if you end up in a line where your car is here, you have to slow down to, I don't know, 30, 40, and you can even get into a situation where your traction control stops working because it only starts working from 50 kilometers in some cars, right? And if you have to slow down to 30, then you put the power down, and instead of going wide, you actually go this. Okay, so make sure to stay tight from the second to last corner, have a wide entry into the last corner. And because we are kind of, you can see this in the steering here, we're turning left, turning left, turning left, turning left, turning left, right away going to the right. We're never actually going straight between these two corners. So we have a weight shift from one side to the other of the car. We cannot be aggressive in the brake here once more. And it's very similar to the hairpin in the first sector, or in turn, what is it? 3, 4, 5 we showed earlier. The same thing happens again where we have the steering input from one side to the other in sync with the brake input, which helps us a bit shift the weight around, let the weight play in our favor a bit, upset the rear again, get a bit of rotation into the next corner. Just make sure you're not slamming it to 100% here, okay? I do it for a microsecond, okay? But in the end, don't overdrive the front axle. We just want to have the correct speed for the corner. We don't kind of have to squeeze every little bit out of that. So let's actually watch in that section. Braking here in somewhat of a straight line, tiny bit of steering angle applied, okay, but only commit to the corner. Once the braking is really done, the speed has come down, then we can increase the steering angle, going a little bit wide now, curb fades away from us, speed keeps decreasing, now the curb comes back towards us, and now we're clipping that very late apex here. Quite aggressive on the initial throttle again, just to keep or get the engine working in the first place, and that might help you get the rear around here as well. Make sure to stay tight, stay tight, stay tight. I can't really commit to the throttle. Never 100% throttle here between these corners, right? Just not really. Nope. Right? So never full throttle here because it just overwhelms the car. It's not needed. We can live with less. Because the position is more important than being aggressive and kind of being on 100% than 90% throttle or something. The speed you build is not the most important between the two corners. The position is going to easily outweigh the speed that you're building. Come from a wide position, not too aggressive on the brake, quickly trail out of the brake again to be able to use all the grip available for actually turning and not taking something away of that with braking and having a nice and straight exit here with early throttle applied, which only works if you come from that wide position. And that is going to help you go onto that straight. And then I'm very much hoping this guide is giving you a few hints, a few tips and tricks of what you need to do in order to get your license. So forget about lap time, really. Just make sure you're driving along the principles of using the width of the track, but not too much, right? We want to stay safe, use the width of the track, but steer fairly and easily within the track limits, prepare the exit of the corners, make the right compromises in connected corners, and then I think you should have an easy time getting your LFM license, and then we welcome you to season 14 in the LFM community. So see you very soon, and make sure you check out the data pack on popometer.io. It is going to be free for everyone signing up to the service. No need to pay anything. You're all going to get access to the data pack. Then download it. You'll get the setup. You'll get the Ghost Lab file. You'll get access to the telemetry I've been showing, and you'll be able to compare this lap against your recorded laps when you go on this drop down menu here. And then you'll be able to see the differences in your driving compared to what I just introduced in this video. And then I hope this is taking you very far and that your ELO and safety rating improves quickly. And then we'll see you on the track. Goodbye.